Kensington, how are we doing today? Great, go ahead and stand with us if you would, as we enter into worship this morning. Sing it with me if you know it. I'm coming with a heart of worship. I'm bringing in a brand new song. I'm ready to see the unthinkable. I'm ready for a miracle. A heart's praying for a fresh encounter. Souls looking to the living God. I'm ready for a real revival. Oh, Holy Spirit, come like a flood, like a fire. Holy Spirit, fall in this place, fill our hearts. Holy Spirit, come like a flood, like a fire. Holy Spirit, come. Holy Spirit, on the edge of a new beginning. God, we know you have so much more. We're looking to a new horizon. We're praying for your rains to pour, and overflowing of true redemption, and overflowing of your kingdom. We're ready for a real revival. Oh, Holy Spirit, come like a flood, like a fire. Holy Spirit, fall in this place, fill our hearts. Holy Spirit, come like a flood, like a fire. Holy Spirit, come. Oh, Holy Spirit, come. Oh, can you feel it? Heaven is reaching. Oh, can you hear it? Our God is speaking. Oh, can you see it? He's got your healing. Oh, just receive it. Receive the freedom. Come on. Oh, can you feel it? Our God is reaching. Oh, can you see it? Our God is speaking. Oh, can you see it? He's got your healing. Oh, just receive it. Receive the freedom. Come like a flood, like a fire. Holy Spirit, fall in this place, fill our hearts. Holy Spirit, come like a flood, like a fire. Holy Spirit, come. Oh, Holy Spirit, come.
No longer I who live, but Christ in me. For I've been born again. My heart is free. The hope of heaven before me. The grave behind. Hallelujah. You brought me back to life. Hallelujah. I won't forget the moment I heard you call my name out of the grip of darkness into the light of grace, just like Lazarus. Oh, you brought me back to life.
Thank you, band. That was great. And I loved watching you guys worship too. I love it. It's my favorite part of the morning, seeing everybody wake up and get going. Well, good morning. We are so glad you're here. You can grab a seat. I'm Susan, and this is Charlotte. We are part of the Orion team. And this morning, we just want to tell you that we're just glad that you chose to be with us here. And those of you online at your cottages, hey, no, we're really glad. We're so glad that you're here. We have a great message today. And, I always think about Labor Day weekend, not as the end of summer, but as the kickoff of fall, right? So college football, pumpkin spice lattes. So that's all the unofficial stuff. But officially, it's actually the kickoff of courses, groups, and care, which is why Charlotte, our discipleship director, is up here with me. Charlotte, what do you want us to know?
Well, so good morning, everybody, and thank you for being here. I know I was talking to Susan on a holiday weekend. We know that a lot of things compete for your time, but I think looking around and seeing who showed up here today and who's tuning in online really tells me something about your desire to pursue God. We are here, we show up because we have this desire to grow closer to God. And I don't know about you, but I've been reading that devotional that goes through our Psalm 23 series. And just this week, it was about how King David says, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil. And he senses God's presence in the valley. And you might be in a valley now, or you might know that there is a valley coming, right, Susan? We know that our life brings valleys. We can face those valleys if we know that God's with us, because the preceding verses are about how King David...
Yeah.
Am I out? Oh, no, I'm good. It was by spending time with God. And one of the ways that I think we can intentionally spend time pursuing God is by joining a smaller group or a class or a course. And here's why. We all have this intention. You're here, right? Because we set this time on our calendar. And with a group or a class, it's on your calendar. And you know you're going to go there because there's other people who are there to meet you who also want to grow in their faith and pursue that together. And I just think that's powerful. We can do these things on our own, but God created us to do it in community. So in 2 weeks, all the opportunities you could hope for are coming up. And you can find out more. Do we have the slide with the group's number, or do I need to, I don't know if we have that to pull up. But we have a text-in number. You text in the word group. Here it is. If you pull out your phone and text 248-845-3058, what that does is it delivers right to your phone the link to the group's page, which access to everything that we have going on. Because I could talk all day about all the different things. And if you go in the lobby after service, we're going to be out there with handouts, sign-up sheets, because we have things like, you hear me talk about Alpha, where you can come to a class, come to a course, ask questions about your faith, be real, get challenged, and meet with other people who want to be honest about their questions about faith. And then Bible Basics, where you come and you learn to take the intimidation away from the beauty of the Word of God. And it's a 5-week class that we just love. But we also have care classes for people who need healing and need to come together with other people for support. And we have groups for men, women, couples, families, singles. Pretty much you have a group that online, in person. So don't let this fall slip by without connecting into a group. We're trying to make it as easy as possible. With the text-in number, I won't bother you, but that does alert my phone. So you have access then to text any questions you have. Hey, what about this group? I didn't hear back from this. When does this happen? Just please, that's what I'm take all the intimidation away and make it easy for you to find your steps. So I'm going to hand it over to Susan, but Susan, you make time. You've always had groups that you're involved with. And so why would you tell people that you make that a priority in your time?
First, I just want to say, all that passion you see, not manufactured, real, she breathes it. This is who Charlotte is, because you really believe in the power of groups, and so do I. And as Charlotte said, I've been in different groups. They kick me out eventually. They get tired of me, but I have been in a few. And I would tell you that is where life change happens. It's not for somebody else. We're all busy. We can all say, oh, I'm just so busy. But it just depends on what your priority is. Is your priority to grow in community, to grow in your faith journey with Jesus? If that's true, then you're going to find an hour and a half every week to meet with your group, come together, pray together, and learn together. So I just can't say enough about groups. I hope that you'll take Charlotte up on her offer. There's a group for just about everybody. Actually, probably for everybody, right?
I think so. I like to think so. start one.
Yeah, exactly. And if you want to start one, I think you should reach out to Charlotte too. So thank you for that, Charlotte. That's fantastic. Yeah, you can go. All right. So the next couple weeks, you're going to have an opportunity to go out into the lobby. There's some tables out there, and she can tell you all about the groups that are available. Of course, the courses like Alpha, my favorite, and for our care ministries. There's just so much happening because it's fall, and fall is launch of everything great, like student ministries. Go, Jesse. So what do you guys need at student ministry? Do you need some leaders? Yep. How about some students? Any students in here? Edge, Breakaway, high school, middle school. Okay, I see a couple. It's a little early. There will be more at the 11 o'clock. I highly believe that. So we're excited about the launch of that as well. If you were here last weekend, you were able to participate in our annual vote. And I have the privilege and honor of telling you that everything passed. Thank goodness, No, we were pretty confident. So I think it was a 95% pass rate on our budget being affirmed for 2023. And 93% of you affirmed the elders for 2023. And we just want to thank you for taking the time and being a part of the heartbeat of what makes us Kensington and what makes this church, in my mind, one of the greatest places to attend. So thank you so much for being a part of that. We're so grateful. We have a special speaker coming up today, my friend Ryan Morrow. But before I get to that, I just want you to know that we are also starting a new series next weekend called Questions Jesus Asked. So I've heard all kinds of, it's questions for Jesus, questions Jesus asked. Do you know that Jesus asked far more questions, like 307, I think, questions, and he answered about a third of the questions asked. So think about that. If Jesus was asking questions, doesn't it make it okay for us to ask them too? I think it's going to be a great series. I'd love for you to take a look at the trailer, and then we're going to get started.
Jesus asked people many questions about what they believe, what they longed for, and how they saw the world. It was Jesus who would ask most of the questions of others, and there were a small handful of ones that he would answer. Even when asked, Jesus would answer back with more questions for consideration. So we're going to look at 3 questions that Jesus asked over 2,000 years ago. So I have a question for you. Could these questions be relevant to our lives today?
All right. Well, good morning, everyone. As Susan said, my name is Ryan Morrill. So glad you're here on this Labor Day weekend. And I'm excited today because we are going to jump into the final part of this series as we've been going through Psalm 23. Now, this is a 3-week series, but for us, it's only been 2 weeks because if you were here 2 weeks ago, we had a huge baptism celebration right here in this auditorium, which was wonderful. So last week, we combined two messages into one. Sam Anderson did a great job with that. And last week, we started to unpack the beginning of Psalm 23, which talks about the beauty and the care of a shepherd for his people and how he makes us lie down in green pastures and leads us beside quiet waters. And then the second part of his message dealt with how that same shepherd, that same father is there for us as we go through great difficulties, as I walk through the darkest of valleys and my enemies try to overcome or overtake me. And God is there through all of that. And so today, we're going to go to the very end of the passage, to Psalm 23, verse 6. It says, Surely goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. It's a passage about faithfulness. And I'm excited to share the message with you in just a few minutes. But before that, we're going to get a chance to walk through this entire passage together on a video. And then we are going to get to worship together with an original recording here from Kensington by Tatiana from our Birmingham campus called Psalm 23. So enjoy, sit back, and take in these next few minutes with Psalm 23.
The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me into paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, and my cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever.
God, you are my shepherd. You lead me to water so
So beautiful. I'm always just amazed at the talent and just, again, the ability that God brings not only here, but to all of the church. So we're going to jump in. Before I forget, I want to just go ahead and take a moment to say thank you to all of you that financially are supporting what is happening here at Kensington. So much of what you do impacts this building, impacts this community, impacts schools that are around us. In fact, this last week, we had convocations for the Pontiac school teachers, Lake Orion teachers as well, right here in this building. So we're partnering so much with what is taking place in this community. So much of what you do impacts the next generation with students that are launching in this next week for our kids as well, and also for places all over the world that you're probably never going to be able to go to, villages and individuals that you're never going to see. But you, through your giving, your generosity, are impacting the world, literally the world. And thank you so much for that. And if you came today wanting to give, we have boxes at the back of the auditorium. If you give financially online, you can continue to do that. And I just want to welcome everyone that is with us today online as well. And thank you so much for being in partnership with us. All right. Now that got that done and didn't forget it, want to talk about this act of forgetting just a little bit because it's a really big part of our lives. I'm willing to bet many of you in this room have forgotten something this week. It might have caused you problems. It might have caused you some sort of pain. We forget so much, right? We forget birthdays. We forget bills that we wish we would have paid. We forget to respond to emails. My boss was just down there. I know that I need to respond to her emails. We can forget big dates. Hopefully you haven't forgotten anniversaries because those are such a key thing in life. But forgetting is just something that is in our human nature. It's something that just happens to us. In the hustle and bustle of our busy lives, we tend to get so focused on the here and now that we don't remember very well. And also in the hustle and bustle of our busy lives, we tend to forget things that have happened in the past. And so much of what happens in the past is critical to our here and now and also critical to our future as well. In fact, I will say this, that I think many times we as just in our world today with technology and the fast forward pace that we're going and always thinking about the future, that there's kind of a negative stigma about what has taken place in the past. Many of us have been told to kind of forget about our past, right? Because there's pain there, there's mistakes there, and even many parts of the New Testament tell us to let go of the past and strive towards what is ahead. But the past is not forgotten. The past should not be forgotten, especially when it comes to the blessings and the great things that God has done. Now, I like to call myself sort of an amateur historian. I studied history in college. I love to read history. I read history pretty much all year long. I'm reading a book right now about Watergate. Why I'm reading that, I don't know. I am related to Richard Nixon, though, so that's part of my own story. But I love to read history. And in reading history, it gives me a perspective. And what historians can do, these are the professional ones, the ones who are really super smart, is they have this ability to rise above the fray of today. And they can go back to events or personalities of a certain moment in time and gather info about that event or about that person, and they can offer perspective into what shaped that moment or that person, and they can also diagnose the long-term impact that that moment or person had on the future. Winston Churchill said this, and it's one of my favorite quotes. He said, "Those that fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it." I love that quote, especially because I love history. I've read so much about Winston Churchill. And what he says is so true in terms of history, but I would tweak it a little bit for today's purposes. And I'll say this, those that fail to remember the blessings of their past are doomed to forget the great things that God has done and is going to do in the future as well. We're such a forward-thinking world, as I said, and I think more and more the value of the past can be put behind us. What matters so much to so many is tomorrow. Great, I get it. Yet for so many of us in this room, here today, the fact that you are here is a testimony to something amazing that God has done in your life. I'm sure each of us has many tales to tell
of near-death experiences, heartbreak that has sent us spiraling, poor choices that nearly ended life or relationships as we know it, right? But yet God, in his infinite strategy, has planned and has intervened on our behalf. He's rescued us, he has spared us, and he has saved us. And he's chosen you. He's chosen each of us to continue to live and fulfill some form of calling in life, big callings, small callings. And also he's called us to be here today, in this room, or to be watching online or in your car or wherever you may be at whatever point in time you are watching this. Why has he done that? The Apostle Paul in 1 Corinthians says this. He says in 1 Corinthians 15, verse 10, he says, "But by the grace of God, I am what I am. But by the grace of God, I am what I am." Meaning, despite all the things I've done in my life, despite my inadequacies, despite my failures, despite my weaknesses, my hurts, my dumb decisions, God has rescued me. God continues to let me be who I am. And I am only here because of the grace and the mercy of God. So, even in my love, though, to remember the past, I still forget how God has led me through amazing times. And I let the tyranny of today overrule the blessings that God has in store for me. Now, I'm a parent of 3 boys, and I have an 18-year-old who graduated high school back in early June, and we are now setting our sights, actually have set our sights on college for him. And just 10 days ago, we did that infamous drive that all parents do, and we took him to college. And it's not close, it's far, it's up in the Upper Peninsula at Northern Michigan University in Marquette. 7.5, 8 hours away with a big bridge in the middle that closes often, right? And so I was preparing myself for many weeks, actually all summer long, for this moment in time. And there were so many emotions that got wrapped into it for me because I love this kid so much and I'm just so proud of him. And as we drove up to Marquette last Wednesday, we stayed in a hotel Wednesday night. He actually went out with a friend and was enjoying some time just getting to know his roommate, getting to know him. And so I was sitting there and all of a sudden sort of panic just overcame me because I realized how much this kid doesn't know, right? And how much I need to tell him about what he doesn't know. So I went down into the lobby of the hotel and I took out a piece of paper and just took out a regular piece of paper just like this. And I folded it, just kind of creased it like this, kind of made just a short little book. And on it, I started to write sort of like a little letter to him. And on it, I put the blessing from number 6, which I'll share a little bit more about that in just a few minutes, about how that's been moving through my life lately. And then I started just giving him bullet points of wisdom because I had a lot to share, right? And soon enough, I had 20 bullet points of wisdom. I thought there were just gonna be 5 or 6, there were 20. And I decided to stop there because I think I could have filled another 20, maybe 30. I could have gone on and on, but I know that he doesn't wanna read this much. So I thought I'm just gonna stop right there while I was ahead. And in those bullet points of wisdom, there were all sorts of like nuggets of truth from our love for him as a family to spiritual truths of God's love and God's plan for him. I gave him basic, just simple things like make your bed, right? Because when you make your bed, it sets up your day well. I shared with him how don't look at social media and see all the things that everybody else is doing at their college and think you're missing out because this is the line I said, the only life you're missing is the life that's in front of you, right? So many teens, so many young people can miss that because they're seeing something else happen. And another one, I said this because he's an adventuresome kid. He just does crazy stuff. I said, don't be stupid. You can and will likely get hurt if you are, right? So I gave that to him. And so this last week, we got home on Friday and it was a sad day. It really was. It was an emotional goodbye. Yes, there were tears. There was a huge hug and it was beautiful. But I got home Friday and the house just felt a little emptier. And but if you're a parent with teens that have cell phones, technology is really great, right? Because there are tracking softwares that still exist on our phone. And because I pay for his phone bill, I still get to see what he's up to. So I would go on, and yeah, it does sound a little creepy, but I would go on and I would see where he is and what he's doing. I'm like, oh, he's in his dorm room, right? And then, oh, he's eating lunch. I can see he's in the dining hall. And, oh, he's back in his dorm room. I hope everything's all right, you know? And then at one point, I could see he was having an adventure. He was out at Presque Isle Park. And if you ever jumped off the Black Rocks, I knew exactly what was going on in there. And then at one point, the dot moved out to what looked like about 100 to 150 yards out into Lake Superior, right? Which that was a concerning moment for me as well. And I just realized I've got to stop this because I'm finding myself worrying about the welfare of my child, right? And the question occurred to me, how am I trusting God in this moment with this 18-year-old? How am I remembering the goodness and faithfulness of God in my life? How he showed up for me and was faithful for me when I was young, when I was 18 years old and I went off to college. How has he shown up for me as a parent and for my son all 18 years? How am I remembering these things? Yet I so easily forget. But I'm comforted by the fact that if I open up the scriptures, the disciples who were literally just spending all the time they could possibly spend for 3 years with the Lord, literally right there next to him, are doing the same exact things that I am as well. They are forgetting. So one of those instances took place in the book of Matthew 16, which I'll share about in just a second because disciples are on a boat with Jesus and he kind of has a moment with them. But just what happened previously in Matthew 15 is there was a miracle that Jesus provided for so many people. There were 4,000 men. It says 4,000 men, which means you can assume there were just as many women and children that were there as well. So we're talking thousands and thousands of people gathered around, and Jesus was healing the sick and the wounded on this day. And at the end of this, as people continue to get sick and healed or getting healed from their sickness, there's a realization that people needed food, and Jesus didn't want everybody to leave. So he said, let's see what we can figure out right now. Let's bring what food we have. And 7 loaves and a few fish, it says, are brought at that moment in time, and they're broken up and they're dispersed among the crowd. And many of you have heard this passage. They feed everybody. Everybody is so full, they throw all the leftovers, and there's 7 baskets full of food that is left over. So that happens just previously to this moment out on the boat that's with Jesus. And then even what looks like just a day or a few days before that, there are 5,000 people gathered around. And same exact thing again. Jesus doesn't want them to go away because they are all hungry. And he says, bring what you can. Right? And so on that moment, 5 loaves, 2 fish are brought, and boom, they're able to provide for everybody once again. So 2 incredible moments involving food, involving lunch, just happened. And this is what we read in Matthew 16. It says this: when they went across the lake, the disciples forgot to take bread. Right? Duh. They just had 2 moments where there wasn't any bread around them, where they were struggling with being hungry. And yet, what do? They forget to bring bread. Then Jesus, in his infinite wisdom, right? Susan was just kind of sharing this, how sometimes he asks questions or he makes statements that nobody can quite understand that's around him. He says, be careful. Jesus said to them, be on your guard against the yeast of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. Now they discussed this amongst themselves, and they said this, is it because we didn't bring any bread? They're literally like, who forgot lunch? Who forgot? Did you forget? They're blaming each other. You can just see, gosh, how did you do this again? Peter, that was your responsibility. How did you leave it all on the shore like that? How did that happen? And aware of their discussion, aware of their argument, so to speak, Jesus asked this, you have little faith. Why are you talking among yourselves about having no bread? Then the killer line right there. Do you still not understand? Do you still not understand? Don't you remember the 5 loaves of the 5,000 and how many basketfuls you gathered? Or the 7 loaves for the 4,000 and how many basketfuls you gathered there as well? Again, he asked them, do you still not understand? And he takes them back and gives them a pop quiz. How many did we feed, right? How much food did we have? How much was left over? And once again, the disciples, key word today, they forgot. They remembered. They remembered. And this is what David does as he concludes the psalm that we've been walking through. He takes him down a trip through memory lane, and in doing so, we see the faithfulness of God. And then he looks confidently into the future where that ultimately would be leading him. Psalm 23:6 is about remembering to take a look in the rearview mirror, and then remembering as well to look ahead. And it's that process that so many of us go through. Actually, I grabbed one of these this week. Somebody brought it over from the collision shop. I was looking for a rear view mirror, and somebody said, just take it off your car. And I'm like, I don't think that's gonna work too well. So he said, why don't you go to the collision shop? So collision shop down there, they just ripped one off of an old car and brought it here. And so many of us, what ends up happening is we have a driver, right? It's not me, it's not you. There's a driver in our life, and that is God. And the question is do we trust that what that driver has done as we look in the rearview mirror, that driver has taken care of us, right? Do we trust that the driver, God, is taking care of us for where we have been? And I think we can be rest assured that whatever God has done to drive us in our life has probably been a pretty good thing. Even though there's been pitfalls and bumps and some bruises along the way, God has still been a very good driver in our life. I hope he has, at least in your mind. And therefore, because he's driven us well in the past, we can trust that he's going to continue to drive us well in the future. Yet for so many of us, we're sort of like that parent who sits in the passenger seat with a student driver, right? You know that painful moment as a parent where you're literally like freaking out at what the driver just did, right? You're scared to death of what just happened, and you're terrified of what that child or that teenager could do again. But God is no student driver. He's the best driver that you could possibly have. And the question is, do we trust him? Now, our first point is this, as I just showed you, as I just shared, remember to look in the rear view mirror. The verse says this, as we look in the rear view mirror, surely goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life. All the days of my life. And sometimes when we think about all the days of my life, once again, we're a forward-thinking creation. Oh, that's what's coming up. No, all the days of your life. From the moment of your birth, even the moment of your conception, all of the days of your life. And as I've reflected on this in my own life, I have come to see often that in the moments of despair, in the moments of tension and pain and worry and anxiety, my reaction is to doubt and wonder about the driver. And what I forget to do because of the pain and the things that are going on around me is I forget to realize how God has continued to has driven me so well through so many seasons of my life. And I look back and I look at my childhood and I look at how God provided so much for me in my childhood and in my teenage years of the angst that all teenagers feel of who am I going to be? Who am I going to become? And that push and pull that teenagers have with parents as they try to assert themselves and step out into the world. And I see God's hand on my life. And as I go to college and I meet certain people and I get involved in certain things, and there's certain moments in time, literally hours of time, where God moved in incredible ways. And I see God stepping into those moments. And I see God so much in my marriage through our successes and so many of our painful times as well. I see how God has led me through so many of the issues that I brought into our marriage. I see how God has led my wife through some of the challenges that she's experienced in her life as well. And yet, I forget that so easily. And if you're a parent, to trust that God has your child, it's one of the hardest things that we can possibly do because we want to hold on so tightly. We want to hover. We want to be that helicopter parent. But yet, God has our families in his hands as well. Remembering is so important. And that is why God had the Israelites do some interesting things. If you look back through the scriptures, there's lots of moments. So much of the Old Testament, so many moments are about God helping people remember because he knew that we were so prone to forget. For example, when God led Israel across the Jordan into the promised land on dry ground, this is what he told them. It comes from Joshua chapter 4. It says, go over before the ark of the Lord your God into the middle of the Jordan. Each of you is to take up a stone on his shoulder, according to the number of tribes of the Israelites, to serve as a sign among you. In the future, when your children ask you, what do these stones mean? Tell them that the flow of the Jordan was cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord. When it crossed the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan were cut off. These stones are to be a memorial to the people of Israel together. So every time parents and children and grandparents would walk by these stones, a story could be told to not only help the people that experienced it to remember, but also so that it could be passed on to the next generation. Because the next generation wouldn't even know it. Because the people that were living it can so easily forget it. Now, David, though when he was young and wrote this actual passage that we're talking about today in Psalm 23, was already building a resume of his own in regards to God's faithfulness as well. David had just been anointed the new king. We've heard this story most likely, but was still waiting to be king because he was very young. He was still a child. And yet there was this moment, this tension with a fight that needed to take place, and he offered to go and fight Goliath. We've all heard the story about Goliath, this giant. And everybody scoffed at him because he was so young and he was so small and he was just a child. He was not this fearsome warrior. But listen to David's response. He has this resume. He has a memory of how God showed up in his life. He says, your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it. I struck it and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by its hair, struck it and killed it. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. This uncircumcised Philistine, he's talking about Goliath right there, will be like one of them because he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of the Philistine. David is remembering what happened. He looked back. And this is what Jesus is doing in the boat with his disciples as well. He's saying, let's take a look back. Let's remember God's faithfulness. It was only a few days ago, and yet you've already forgotten. So let's do everything we can to remember. My hope for this room today is that you can look back on your life and you can see the moments where God has spoken and moved in your life, where his faithfulness has shown up for you. And some of you in this room might think, I've had a really hard life. I can't recall many moments at all, but I'll just say again, once again, the fact that you're here today, that you are living, means that God has proven and shown up in your life in some way. But my hope is you can go and you can go back, whether you're just recalling those, maybe you need to write it down. I used to journal so much. I had journals and journals through some key moments, especially challenging times in my life, where I would write down the blessings of God. And it was a way for me, just by putting pen to paper, to help recall and remember these amazing things that God has done in our life. Because by building that spiritual resume, by building that memory muscle, it also helps us focus on what is ahead as well. I'm good at recalling dates in my life. It's just something happened. I remember early December 1990, there was a moment that I will always stick with where I had an encounter with God out in a field in Colorado, and it was a moment where God spoke to me and moved me. And that is a moment where I recall his faithfulness, and he had shown me some things even in that moment, and I continue to lean on that moment in my life. And in January 1995, when God kind of revealed to me after a night, I was just started working with students, and he revealed to me at that point, this is something that you need to do with the rest of your life. And it was so crystal clear. And here we are, how many years later, since then, decades later, and that's still the calling on my life. And I will hold that moment in time in my car, that realization so close, the faithfulness of God in my life. I will recall August 3rd, just this last month, I was sitting right down here, actually standing. It was our Rock Your Family midweek night. I got a chance to interview so many of our pastors that were up here and just hear about them and their wives, share about their challenges as parents. It was a beautiful night. And as we came off the stage, we went into a song called The Blessing. Again, I referred to that earlier in number 6. And it came over me at that moment in time. And there's been an issue in our family, just a tension that we are going through. And all of a sudden, while we're in the middle of that song, boom, a text message shows up on my phone. I wish I hadn't looked at it, but I saw it right there, and boom, there it was. Right there. It is not going away. But this song, The Blessing, just kept going and it kept going. And I will forever hold on to this moment because at the end it starts saying, he is for you. He is for you. He is for you. He is for you. And I kept thinking, he is for me. He is for my wife. He is for my children. He is for my family. I've put that song into my playlist. Actually, I made a playlist for my college son in perfect 80s and 90s fashion, right? Sent it to him on iTunes, and that song is in there. It's just a way for him to remember the blessing that has been prayed over him and God's faithfulness in his life as he has been faithful in mine as well. He has been my shepherd. He has always been my shepherd. Find ways to remember that, to recall God's faithfulness. Draw from your own story, especially when things are difficult. Now, the second point that we have is this: remember to look ahead. Remember to look ahead. And this is what it says: and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. And I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. David knew where the story of his life was heading. He really did. He knew the end game, which was really just the beginning of forever. And by the way, as David wrote Psalm 23, he was being searched. He was being hunted for because Saul, the king, wanted to kill him. So his life is in jeopardy. Imagine if the greatest governing power was trying to find you and kill you. That's the frame of reference and the frame of mind that David had as he's writing the psalm. And then look at what resulted from that. Knowing that the outcome, that things are heading for something much greater and more beautiful than we could ever possibly imagine, it gives us a perspective. And it shapes how we're living in the here and now. Growing up in Denver, Colorado, I'm a huge Denver Broncos fan. I just love the Denver Broncos. I follow them all of my years. And some great things happened in the 1980s for the Broncos. They got a really good quarterback those years. Those of you that are football fans know who I'm talking about. And on January 11th, 1987, the Denver Broncos were in the AFC Championship against the Cleveland Browns, playing in, Brad shared with me, Municipal Stadium in Cleveland, Ohio. And they were down in the last quarter, and they got the ball with less than 2 minutes left. I think 1 minute and 58 seconds left. John Elway was the quarterback, and with 1 minute and 58 seconds, he executed the drive. That's what it's known as. And he marched down the field, surgically got it to all of his receivers, and threw a touchdown pass to Mark Jackson with just a few minutes left. And it was a wonderful moment for the city of Denver. We're going back to the Super Bowl. We hadn't been there in so long. I had no idea. This was like the biggest thing to happen. And the whole city's going nuts. And guess what? I missed the whole thing. I didn't watch anything in the fourth quarter. Why? Because I was so anxious. I was a nervous wreck. I went outside and I would pace around in my driveway. I would pace up and down the street. My neighbors would come out, my friends in the neighborhood. We'd go and we would just walk around because we couldn't watch it because we were so upset. We were so worried about losing this game. And the only feedback we would have is we would hear roars coming from the houses when good plays happened. And then we heard the roof blowing roar that happened when the touchdown got scored, right? It's something that we haven't experienced in Detroit very much. You know, we haven't had that moment hardly at all. And yet, I was so worried about losing. So many of us pace, and so many of us worry and fret and miss the life that is in front of us because we are scared of loss. And in that fear, we miss the joy and the promises that God has for us. I marvel and celebrate when people who are going through cancer are able to rally themselves. And they're able to say, you know, instead of curling up in a ball, which is something I think I would be inclined to do, and just letting a wave of depression and fear come over them, they say, let's go. I'm gonna fight this, and I'm not going to let this ruin my here and my now. That's something that just happened in my own family with my mother. She stepped right into it, and she's coming out the other side of it, even as we speak right now. It's what the Apostle Paul in 2 Corinthians said. He said, therefore do not lose heart. Though outwardly we are wasting away, yet inwardly we are being renewed day by day. For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. So we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but on what is unseen, since what is seen is temporary, and what is unseen is eternal. Now, I want to close right now with Jesus' promise. This is a promise that he gives to us of victory, a promise of all eternity. David's words are about the house of the Lord. That's how the passage concludes. And I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. And it makes us mindful of the promise of Jesus about the house that he is preparing. He tells his followers to not let their hearts be troubled by what might surround us, because he has something in mind for us that he's working on. And Jesus knows this as well. He knows about our momentary troubles. He knows how prone we are to forget. And he says this in John 14, do not let your hearts be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. My Father's house has many rooms. If that were not so, would I have told you that I'm going there to prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to be with me, that you may also be where I am. The cure for a troubled heart is found resting in the promise of the Lord. Do you believe this? That's the question of the hour. Do you believe this? Does this perspective shape your reality? Not ignoring that there are hard parts of your present reality, not ignoring that you could be walking through the darkest of valleys, but framing it in the context of this wonderful promise of God. We are all in battles in some way, shape, or form. There is a game that is being waged, that is being played out. And my hope is, just as I can go back and watch replays of the drive now online, and I enjoy every single minute of it, my hope is that you realize that there is a victory that is yours, that has already been won for you. And just like me, I get fret and I worry about the moment and I wonder about the outcome. We have an outcome that has been guaranteed for us on the cross, a promise of all eternity. That means we don't have to rest. We don't have to sit in these hurts forever. That eventually there will be victory, there will be glorious, there will be a promise that is fulfilled. All we have to do is remember that. And we remember by looking back and seeing the great, beautiful things that God has done in our life. And it helps us move forward, knowing that the promise of all eternity and being ultimately with him is in front of us. I hope you can rest on that and know that. I want to close and read this passage together, as it's something that when we actually read out loud and we actually speak words out loud, it does something to our brains. We actually recall things, like it engages millions and more brain cells, and it actually sticks with us all the more. So what I'd love for us to do is actually to recite all of Psalm 23 together. So if you will stand with me, I would love to go ahead and read this together as a body of Christ. This is what it says. Read it together. The Lord is my shepherd. It's going to be up on the screen for you. There it goes. The Lord is my shepherd. I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along the right paths for his name's sake. And even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil. For you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and love will follow all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Amen. We're going to worship now with a song called Yesterday, Today, and Forever. Let this be a thank you to him as you recall, but you believe and rest on the promises of God.
Lift your head, lift your eyes, look to the sun. In the test, in the trial, his grace is enough. His grace is enough. Oh, my soul, remember you're singing to. He's still the Lord Almighty. He's still the King of Kings. He's still the risen Savior, reigning over everything. His name is still the highest. His strength will never fail. His word is everlasting, yesterday, today, and forever. Keep the faith, fan the flame. Don't give up the fight. In the night, speak His name. Yeah, His hope is alive. Our hope is alive. Oh, my soul, remember who you're singing to. Take heart, hold on. Come on. Remember who you're singing to. He's still the Lord Almighty. He's still the King of Kings. He's still the risen Savior, reigning over everything. His name is still the highest. His strength will never fail. His word is everlasting, yesterday, today, and forever. Oh, yesterday, today, and forever. Through our days, there's one name we count on, there's one name we trust. Let's sing that name together. Jesus, Jesus, the one I can count on, the one thing I'm sure of. Jesus, Jesus, the rock that I stand on. I stake my life on. Jesus, Jesus, the one I can count on, the one thing I'm sure of. Jesus, Jesus, the rock that I stand on. I stake my life on He's still the Lord Almighty. He's still the King of Kings. He's still the risen Savior, reigning over everything. His name is still the highest. His strength will never fail. His word is everlasting, yesterday, today, and forever. Oh, yesterday, today, and forever. Oh, yesterday, today, and forever. Never change, can never change. Yesterday, today, and forever. Oh, yesterday, today, and forever. They never change. We're still the same, God. Your love still consumes me. You're still chasing after me. Sing my heart and my soul. Sing this together, church. My heart and my soul, I give you control. Consume me from the inside out, Lord. Let justice and grace become my embrace. To love you from the inside. One more time. My heart and my soul,
beautiful. Thank you. They make this look so easy, but they rehearse so much. So thank you for bringing that today. It was beautiful, and we loved it. Ryan, thank you for the great word this morning. Totally enjoyed that. Just kind of a deposit into your heart, don't you think? I love that. All right, so before you leave, don't forget about groups out in the lobby. Go talk to Charlotte. Do it today. You have time. What's there to rush? There's no rush. Go hang out in the lobby. Also, we want you to know that we have prayer that's going to be down in front here. If anybody needs prayer, I'm going to be here. Keith is here. We have people to pray with you. And lastly, come back next week for our new series on questions Jesus asked. We look forward to seeing you, you guys. Have a wonderful day. We'll see you next weekend.